The 2026 Senate elections are less than a year and a half away. Republicans won a solid 53-seat majority back in 2024, and in this video, I'll be going over my updated 2026 Senate map prediction. There are going to be a number of highly competitive races, a lot of places where Democrats are vulnerable, where Republicans can potentially expand upon their majority. We'll begin by filling in the solid states for both parties. There are states where the incumbent Republicans or Democrats are going to win by 15 percentage points or more. There's not going to be any real competition in these states. So we'll start off with the solid red states. We have Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, South Dakota, Nebraska, Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, West Virginia, and South Carolina. This gives them already 47 seats. They only need to win 3 out of the remaining 19 races to maintain their Senate majority, as they do have J.D. Vance, the vice president, who breaks all the ties. So Republicans only need 50 seats. Democrats need 51. Now, for the solid blue states, we have a much smaller number. We only have Oregon, Illinois, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and Delaware. This will give the Democrats 39 seats. So with all of the solid states filled in, Republicans already take an 8-seat lead. We'll now move on to the likely states, starting off with the likely states for Republicans. These are races the GOP is going to win by 5 to 15 points, so they're going to be slightly more competitive than the solid states, but one party or one candidate will have a pretty clear advantage. And we'll start off in Ohio. After J.D. Vance left the Senate, John Husted was put in to replace him as the junior senator from Ohio, and he will likely run against Tim Ryan. Tim Ryan is the same person that lost to J.D. Vance back in 2022. That's how Vance got to the Senate. John Husted leads by 6.5 points according to the polls. Ohio is a state that Trump carried by a double-digit margin against Kamala Harris, and considering how red the state is, there's no doubt that John Husted will win his re-election to a full 6-year term by at least 5 points. And before we continue, we have a message from our sponsor. If you like to stream movies and TV shows, you're definitely missing out on a huge catalog of entertainment not available in your country. That's where Private Internet Access VPN steps in. What's a VPN? Well, whenever you're browsing online, your device is transmitting a ton of personal information out into the open, which can be viewable by anyone. A virtual private network hides your IP address and encrypts your internet connection through a secure tunnel, protecting your data from those trying to exploit your private information. Private Internet Access is the world's most transparent VPN provider with over 30 million downloads. With PIA, your information is safe. All you have to do is use PIA VPN to change your virtual location to another country. I recently wanted to watch The Godfather, but it wasn't available in the US. A simple PIA VPN connection to a Canadian server instantly made it accessible. And it's not just about streaming. With PIA VPN, you're getting both security and access. I chose PIA VPN because it hides your IP and encrypts your connection, allowing you to access websites blocked by the government. Signing up for Private Internet Access is completely risk-free. They offer a 30-day money-back guarantee, and if you use my link in the description, you'll get an 83% discount. That's just $2.03 a month, plus 4 extra months completely free. Moving on now to Iowa, Joni Ernst is the incumbent Republican senator. She was elected back in 2020, defeating Teresa Greenfield by a narrow 6.5% margin. This race was surprisingly close, but just like Ohio, Iowa has taken a huge shift to the right over the last couple of years. Trump carried it by nearly a solid margin. Joni Ernst, even though she isn't the most popular, she will likely win her re-election and win it by at least 5 points. Iowa will also be placed into the likely GOP column. Next up in Florida, this will give Republicans their 50th seat, and we've barely started the video. We have more likely states left. That's just how strong of a position Republicans are in right now going into these midterms. Now in Florida, we have Ashley Moody as the incumbent Republican. She was appointed after Marco Rubio left the Senate to become Trump's Secretary of State. Marco Rubio in 2022 won re-election by 16 points. In 2024, Rick Scott won by 13. There's no doubt that Florida is going to be a Republican hold. Ashley Moody is going to win her re-election by at least a double-digit margin. Moving up now to Maine, Susan Collins will be running for re-election to a sixth term. She is already the longest serving member of Congress from her state, a record that she was expected not to take back in 2020 when she was losing to Sarah Gideon in literally all of the polls. In 2020, the race was looking terrible for the incumbent Republican Susan Collins. I mean, just look at her result from 2016. She wins by 37 points, but because of how much more polarized the country was, and especially the state of Maine after the 2016 election, 2020 was a lot more difficult for Collins. All the polls had her losing by double-digit margins, 8 to 9 points, but she somehow won by that margin despite having significantly less money. Sarah Gideon, with the full backing of the Democratic wallet, lost to Susan Collins by nearly a double-digit margin. Susan Collins at this point can basically fend off any challenger. She will win a sixth term, and Maine is going to be the fourth likely Republican state on this map. This will give them an outright majority at 51 seats. And finally, the last likely red state on this map is going to be Alaska, where Dan Sullivan will be seeking a third term in office. He'll be running against Mary Peltola. Peltola is the former congresswoman that won the Alaska at-large district in 2022. Now, the main reason she won is because her main opponent was Sarah Palin, probably the worst person Republicans could have put on the ballot. Against Dan Sullivan, who is a much stronger candidate, Mary Peltola is very likely to lose. She lost in 2024 to Nick Begich, and that is why she is no longer serving in the House. And if you look at a poll from over 2 years ago, it does show Peltola up by 3%, but that means basically nothing at this point. Dan Sullivan is on track to win his re-election. It's Alaska. It's a conservative state. It is a state that Trump carried by 13 points in the general election. We're now going to move on and take a look at the likely seats for Democrats. They're not even at 40 yet, but they will be able to get across that line with 3 quick victories. Starting off in Colorado, John Hickenlooper, the former governor who won his first term in the Senate back in 2020, he is going to secure a second term later next year. John Hickenlooper will win by at least 5 points, but probably not more than 15. In New Mexico, Ben Ray Lujan, also first elected in 2020. He will also likely win re-election in 2026. Now, he has been plagued by health issues. He might face a tough challenger, but ultimately, he is going to win the seat, and very likely by 5 points or more. And then up in New Jersey, Cory Booker, he's become one of the most prominent Democrats on the national stage and certainly in the U.S. Senate. He is going to win re-election. He's been serving since 2013. And so we have 3 quick wins right off the bat there for Democrats. They are now at 42. Moving up north to New Hampshire, we have a pretty interesting race here. Jeanne Shaheen will not be running for re-election. She's the incumbent Democrat that won by a solid margin back in 2020. Instead, the Democratic nominee is likely to be Chris Pappas. Now, on the Republican side, if Chris Sununu had chosen to run for this seat, he probably would have won. He's the very popular former Republican governor. He served 4 terms, 8 years. It's 4 2-year terms up in New Hampshire. The Granite State could have been his, but Sununu declined to run, and without him, Republicans are going to struggle to win this seat. Chris Pappas will likely become the next U.S. Senator from New Hampshire. It is going to be likely blue. Next up in Virginia, incumbent Democrat Mark Warner will be seeking re-election to a 4th term. He'll likely be running against Governor Glenn Youngkin, the Republican governor of this state. Now, Glenn Youngkin is the first Republican governor of Virginia for over a decade when he was elected back in 2021. He'll be term limited in early 2026. He started his term in 2022. Virginia holds their gubernatorial elections in these off years, and he will be term limited as governors in Virginia cannot serve 2 consecutive terms. And this gives him the perfect opportunity to run for U.S. Senate against Mark Warner, who I would say is the weaker out of the 2 between him and Tim Kaine. Looking at the polls, though, Warner leads about 45 to 38, according to a poll conducted earlier this year. I mean, it's just so early out that something like this doesn't really matter at all. Glenn Youngkin has a very good chance at winning. He's a relatively relatively popular governor. He is also much younger than Mark Warner. And so if they were to go head to head, I would say that both candidates have a good shot, but I would still give, at least right now, Mark Warner a very slight advantage. And so the Commonwealth of Virginia is going to be likely blue, but this is definitely subject to change. Up in Minnesota, we have another likely blue state, a state that Kamala Harris almost lost in 2024, even though she ran with the state's literal governor, Tim Walz, as her running mate. And so Trump came pretty close late last year. And looking at the Senate, Tina Smith, she won by 5 points in 2020. She would be the best candidate for Democrats as she is the incumbent, but she has chosen not to seek re-election. And as a result, Peggy Flanagan, the lieutenant governor, she is likely to become the next U.S. senator from Minnesota if she does win the primary and then the general election. On the Republican side, we don't really have too good of an idea of who is going to run. There isn't the best bench for Republicans in Minnesota just because it's been controlled by Democrats for a very long time. No Republican has won the state in a presidential election since 1972. But Peggy Flanagan, she is right now the favorite. Minnesota is going to be lean blue. It is going to be incredibly close, but considering its blue history, I will give Democrats a very slight advantage. We don't know who the Republican is going to be yet, so just like Virginia, the rating here is also subject to change, and this is definitely another race that we'll be keeping a close eye on. We're now left with just 3 states. These are all going to be decided by tilt margins, so margins less than 1%. For those lean states, Minnesota and Virginia, the margins are going to be 1 to 5. But with Michigan, North Carolina, and Georgia, these 3 races are going to go down to the wire. And so we'll begin in Michigan. This is a state that Democrats should win pretty easily. They have Gary Peters, the incumbent. He did win by less than 2 points in 2020, but with the incumbency, Democrats would still be expected to hold on to this seat in a state that does lean to the left generally. However, Gary Peters has announced that he will not be running for re-election to a 3rd term after his narrow margin of victory in 2020. And the problem for Democrats is not that they don't have good people that could replace him, but the fact that everyone that is declared so far is quite honestly pretty underwhelming and not notable in any way. If you look at the candidates that have declined, though, this is where you see all of these strong contenders for this seat. I mean, Pete Buttigieg, even though he wouldn't make the best national candidate, he would still do quite well in a Michigan Senate race. I mean, this is someone that Democrats would want. They would also want Gretchen Whitmer. Now, this is likely because Whitmer is eyeing the presidency in the Democratic primary in 2028, but Whitmer, I believe, would, even over Buttigieg, be the best candidate to replace Gary Peters. But without these 2 big names in the race, Democrats just don't really have anyone significant right now, but Republicans certainly do. They have Mike Rogers. Rogers is a former member of the House of Representatives, and he became very close to winning the Senate seat in 2024. Alyssa Slotkin won by just 0.34%. And the reason why this is so impressive is because nobody thought that Mike Rogers would actually win. Republicans gave him no money, but somehow he became such an underdog and somebody that performed so much better than expected. He came so close, and next time he's definitely going to have a lot more funding, and he is much more well known than he was going into 2024. And so Democrats are really going to struggle here, and without any good candidates that have publicly expressed interest or have declared, I will be placing Michigan into the tilt Republican category. Next up, in North Carolina, Thom Tillis is fighting for his life right now, not only to win the general election, but also to win the Republican primary. He is running for a 3rd term. He narrowly won back in 2020. The main reason he won 6 years ago was because Cal Cunningham was found to be cheating on his wife very late into the campaign. Cal Cunningham, the Democratic nominee. If that hadn't have happened, Thom Tillis probably would not be sitting in the U.S. Senate right now. if you look at his main Democratic challenger, it's probably going to be Roy Cooper. At least this is the best person that Democrats have. He is the former two-term governor that just left office earlier this year. Roy Cooper leads very slightly in all of the polls, but again, this is just hypothetical polling. We aren't sure yet if Roy Cooper is actually going to run. He is expected to make a decision later next month. But for now, with the consideration that Thom Tillis could still be replaced, he could be replaced by someone better, and the fact that he is still a two-term incumbent, combine that with Roy Cooper not having officially entered the race, North Carolina right now is going to be tilt Republican on my map, although this is definitely subject to change as we continue to hear announcements coming from these potential candidates. And finally, we have yet another competitive Senate election in Georgia. I mean, this all started back in 2020 when Jon Ossoff and Raphael Warnock were narrowly elected in runoffs. In 2022, Warnock won his re-election because the 2020 race was only a special election for Warnock. But now we have Jon Ossoff defending his seat to win a second 6-year term. He has a pretty good chance depending on who he runs against. Jon Ossoff is doing well against Brad Raffensperger. He hasn't officially decided whether or not he's going to run. He's the Secretary of State of Georgia. Brian Kemp, though, this is the best candidate for Republicans. They really wanted him in this race. Even Donald Trump endorsed him, even though Trump endorsed his primary challenger for the governorship back in 2022. That, of course, was David Perdue. Brian Kemp has chosen not to run. He was the person at best positioned to defeat Jon Ossoff. Now against Marjorie Taylor Greene, Jon Ossoff does very well. He also does do pretty well against Mike Collins as well. So it really depends on who Ossoff runs against. It's likely not going to be Marjorie Taylor Greene, though. If you look at the primary, she is actually the favorite right now without Brian Kemp in the primary. If Brian Kemp was there, he would probably be winning. But Brian Kemp is out, and so Marjorie Taylor Greene is the favorite among Republican primary voters. However, it's very unlikely that she is actually going to run. She knows she cannot win in a statewide election against Jon Ossoff. And so if you look at the other four candidates, Mike Collins right now seems to be the favorite, and he could run a pretty good campaign against Ossoff. So it's very early right now. We have a lot of time left to see how this race continues to develop. But for now, it's going to be tilt Democratic, with Democrats at a very slight advantage. Georgia, though, does generally lean to the right. I mean, Trump carried it by 2 points. Brian Kemp won his re-election as governor by 5 points back in 2022. But with Democrats holding on to the incumbency here, they are looking to be in a rather strong position in such a competitive state. And so this is my updated 2026 Senate map prediction. Republicans at 54 seats, Democrats at just 46. Republicans are on track to easily hold on to all of their incumbencies, with the exception of North Carolina, but they are also in contention in both Michigan and Georgia. It's going to be quite an exciting cycle that we have ahead of us. And as we enter the summer, we will be ramping up on our uploads here. And make sure you check out Private Internet Access VPN and use my link in the description below to get 83% off plus 4 months free. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure you leave a like down below and comment down below which seats you think Democrats or Republicans can flip in the midterms, and subscribe to my channel so you won't miss our future uploads. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.